Hi everyone, welcome to another Search Pilot webinar. Thank you for joining us. I am extremely excited this week to be joined by Abby Gleason, Senior Product Manager for SEO at Upwork. And Abby has been running a ton of interesting experiments that I think will be of interest to all of you, but also has a really interesting take and blend of experience across the how to bring product together with SEO, which is something that we've talked about a few times with a few different folks. But I'm particularly interested to hear how that has been valuable on the journey from user-generated content with script experience through to at Upwork, which again is content that's being produced for you in a sense from the folks looking to hire. So. Yeah, we'll get into all of that. But firstly, thank you, Abby. And I'd love to just start out by hearing a little bit about how you got to this point. Like, what's your background? What's the career look like up to this point?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks so much for having me, Will. So excited to be here. It's funny. I feel like you ask 100 SEOs how they got into it, and you'll get 100 different answers.
Sure.
So I started out just in kind of general marketing, graduated with a PR and creative writing degree. And my first job out of school was a very like generalist marketer doing everything from like social posts to blogging to packaging swag for
Oh,
sales,
wow.
everything. And so one of the things I was doing is, running the blog and reporting on traffic with Google Analytics. And I noticed that one week we were getting traffic despite me not promoting our blog on email or social. And I looked and I saw the traffic was mostly coming from Google. And that kind of first question, which looking back, it's very meta, I Googled, how do you get traffic from Google? And I think I read like a Brian Dean Backlinko blog post about, the basics of SEO and then signed up for Ahrefs and just started really deep diving. I thought it was so interesting that you could, meet search intent with matching these keywords. So it was kind of an interesting mix of like psychology and writing, which I was super interested in. And I just fell down the rabbit hole. I started running tests, even, way back then a decade ago, where I would just look at the top keywords, incorporate them better, and then I would see that traffic go up and to the right. And I don't know about other SEOs, but like I think that is kind of like an addictive quality of the job, is just kind of making a change and seeing the impact. Do you ever feel that, Will?
For sure. Yeah, I'm too competitive, and I think get folks off the record certainly, and you get to hear all about that kind of competition. In fact, I am always partial to. So when I got started in the industry, a lot of folks still called it competitive webmastering. And I've always been partial to that as like maybe this whole thing is a sport, and
Yeah.
I think that fell a little by the wayside as it kind of professionalized, and as folks were increasingly not just working on their own website, but they were working for clients, or they were working in house as a kind of corporate position. But yeah, there's something about that competitive webmastering
Yeah,
that
there
always stuck
really
with me.
is. And that's kind of that competitive spirit. You kind of always want to outrank yourself and improve. And so from there, I fell in love with SEO. I knew I wanted to explore that further. And so I started working at an SEO agency, and I worked
Mhm.
there for 4.5 years. Our clients were almost exclusively SaaS and e-commerce. And I particularly found myself drawn to like the tech SaaS companies, really
Mhm.
because their product is the website in a lot of ways.
Right.
Like you need people to sign up. It's kind of the front page for every interaction. And I found that working with those clients, they were really invested in their content, in their conversions. And so that is kind of where I knew I wanted to go next. And I really wanted to work in-house, because I had the chance agency side to work a little bit with like developers, designers, analysts. And I was just like, I want this kind of full time.
Yep.
And then that's how I found myself at Scribd. And it was my first product role. So I became an SEO product manager. And so the way I view that as like the main difference being in product is I have my own engineering team. So I
Mhm.
worked directly with engineers to implement the roadmap that I set out. And so we work in like 2 week sprints, the kind of agile formula. And it's funny because it was really similar to what I was doing agency side and what I think most people do, even if they're not labeled product, is you work off a roadmap, you prioritize your items, and usually you work in sprints, whether it's quarters, months, weeks, to get things done. And so it's really, I think of product as more of like a framework, rather than like you need super specific skills. I think if you are a good strategist and a good SEO, it's anyone could be in product, provided you can just learn to work well with engineers.
For sure. I actually, and I think it particularly goes that way around, like to be good at SEO, especially in in-house roles, especially on large websites, you need some of the product skills wherever you get them from. Because we've talked about that with a few folks, and I think you really get stuck if you can't communicate clearly those requirements and the reasons behind those requirements and the stories that underpin them and all of that kind of stuff. So we'll get deeper into all of that. But and I'm very familiar with that kind of career arc, because prior to SearchPilot, we ran an agency for many years, and so I've seen a lot of folks do that. 3, 4, 5 years at an agency and then go and do the in-house thing, often doing exactly what you described, kind of wanting to dive deeper into it, wanting to get at scale, and that product, whether it's into a product or an SEO engineering role, having that kind of, I guess, hands on the actual levers of power, I suppose, or at least levers of influence. And I think that works really well. And my view, biased, I guess, but I'm out of the game now, but I think that getting started in an agency is a really, really powerful way of doing that, because you get to see across so many sites, across so many industries, and you get to see all those weird problems. And crucially, your colleagues around you in an agency are some of the smartest folks who are solving all those problems. I'm guessing you saw something similar.
Absolutely. I would honestly, for anyone looking to grow their career in SEO, I think agency is the way to start. It's just like a fire hose of learning. I often say I felt like my first year in agency was worth 4. And so by the time I'd spent 4 years, I just felt like I had just a really good foundation. There's such a benefit too of like both having just a large mix of clients, like I had anywhere from 5 to 10 clients at a time. And so I was able to test all sorts of things, and the learnings kind of compounded. So I just gained a lot of insights into what worked and what didn't across industries. And then the other thing is, working agency side, you're working alongside other SEOs. And I find that agency is a really great way to kind of learn from a lot of different people's experience, because it's rare when you go in-house to be working with, let's say, 5 to 10 other SEO people. Maybe, a lot of times you're the only person. Sometimes you have a small team, but agency is that place where you kind of like can build that community of knowledge. So yeah, I totally agreed. I think it's an amazing place to start, or even, go career wide.
The fire hose is real. And I think, when you think about those folks who've been there, as you said, like the length of time you were there by the end, that kind of 4 years mark, 5 years, they are the veterans by that point. And it's something I really vividly remember. Actually, my brother used to work with us in London and then moved to New York and opened out our New York office. And when he had left, must have been a year or 2 after he left Distilled, and I remember one of the guys he'd recruited when he'd been with us coming and saying that he missed having around folks with the experience that, when he joined, Tom was there with that level of experience. And I had to point out to him, by that stage, he had more experience than Tom had at the point when he'd been hired. And so, it's like you just gain that experience so fast. And like you say, you're drinking from the fire hose.
You do. And then when you go in-house, you actually have to be, I think, more intentional about maintaining your learning, because you might not be learning from a lot of different clients or from a lot of different folks who do exactly what you do. So that's where I found like LinkedIn really helpful, is just following the smartest people I knew, looking at what they were doing, and then just being intentional about creating groups. I have like an SEO product manager group with some folks, and that is super helpful. We try to meet monthly. So yeah, you definitely have to keep that going.
Yeah. Do you meet in person? Is that a physical meetup?
I wish. No, virtually. We're all over.
Yeah. Because I was going to ask about that actually. Like, how do you stay on top of it aside from those things? Do you get to go to any conferences? What medium do you think you kind of pick up that? And
Yeah, definitely. So aside from the things I mentioned, I did have the chance to attend the Women in Tech SEO conference in Philadelphia this October. That was an awesome way to learn from other people. And I just get the most out of conferences just really from networking and just following up with people and chatting about the talks after, and then kind of connecting on LinkedIn, chatting. And then as well, there's an organization called MinSearch that I was on the board of for a few years. And we still have semi-regular meetups. So it's really nice just to kind of catch up with other people in the industry, and that's nice to have something local. But I would say since I work remote, most of my work is remote, and I'm very fortunate to have a team of three other SEOs at Upwork, and so we share learnings. I mean, you should see our channel; it just pops off every day with all different sorts of things. So I learn so much from them every day.
I can imagine. I love that. The Slack and the private groups and those kind of things
Love it.
is the thing that that's where it feels like the most vibrant discussions are these days. When I was getting started, it was like SEO Moz blog comments, and then it was Twitter.
Twitter,
And
I know, rip.
yeah,
It's kind of over.
sad. But these days it definitely feels like those kind of private groups. So I guess advice to the audience is, if you are looking for that kind of professional development and that kind of learning, definitely go looking for those groups. Whatever, it doesn't, the format, the medium doesn't really matter. There could be a Slack group, it could be a WhatsApp group, could be whatever, but they're out there. And
Yeah.
so connect to folks that you know and respect. Ask them if they have recommendations of communities you could join. Some of these are just open access. Some of them you need to sign up for or register for or whatever else. But I would definitely take that up, because that seems to be where the most interesting, most innovative stuff is happening. It actually ties into something that I was going to ask about. My guess is this was something that probably started in the agency era for you, but you've ended up with a relatively technical slant on some of this stuff. So you described kind of starting in very generalist marketing, and I've never done product packaging and that end of things, but physical, actual, like real world stuff still slightly freaks me out, because way back in the day, when we were just building websites and things, we took on one or two print marketing gigs, and I still have like cold sweats about printing stuff wrong, because you can just fix it on the internet. And I think we got like a postal code wrong on something. It wasn't even our fault, right? The client got it wrong. They signed off on it. They signed off on the proof. They signed off on everything. But then when you've printed 10,000 copies or something, it's like, that was a lot of money back then. Anyway, point being, you started in that area, and then you've ended up, especially when you're running tests, it can be quite data heavy. You're communicating with engineers. There's a much more technical slant on it. Did you just learn that in the agency days, or has that been a more deliberate journey as well?
I definitely think it started really agency side, is kind of learning how to take technical concepts, and then you need to be able to kind of translate it in a way at that time clients will understand. It's interesting because how we define like technical SEO or content can be kind of, it can be up for interpretation. I consider myself like actually primarily more on like the content or UX side, where, obviously have like the experience with large sites of like managing like crawl budget and managing like indexation and sitemaps and all of that good stuff. But at the same time, I think the content side is really interesting of like, controlling, like EAT and just making sure that you're kind of meeting search intent. And even now I'm going a bit further into like the actual like user engagement signals. So how people interact and click on things like the CTAs, the FAQs, in order to register or sign up for the product.
Yeah. Interesting. So there's so many avenues to go down. We'll have to do them one by one. So firstly, you talked about communication there and communicating with the team and the engineers or whoever else it might be. And you've talked, I think, publicly in the past about product requirement docs, PRDs.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about how you think about that in an SEO context.
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever there's a task that needs to be done, so kind of like zooming out, looking at the roadmap, I typically, always try and start with an annual plan, which of course 2 weeks in gets blown up in smoke. But so then it kind of turns into like quarterly or monthly plans. I really try and prioritize items by effort and impact. So what is a reasonable amount of effort for the highest impact? And so I'll take those items, and especially if it's a small task. We use Jira right now, so I'll just create a ticket for it if it's like changing a title tag or making a quick fix. But for things that are like full-scale projects, for instance, maybe changing a page template or making a large technical change, that's where the PRD, product requirement doc, comes in. And so the outline of that is actually pretty simple. It's kind of the way, just think of like a written doc of how you describe it to your boss or your lead engineer. So you start with like the overview of the problem. So this is what you're trying to solve. This is the expected impact. So you'll have like a hypothesis. If we solve this, then we'll see this. Here's why it's a priority. And then you'll outline what, the solution requirements. So let's say it's a template change. You'll kind of detail exactly what you want it to look like. You might provide an example. I actually find AI tools like it's called v0.dev. That's really helpful in creating kind of mock-ups if you just need to explain roughly what it should look like without being a designer yourself, which I'm certainly not. And then you'll put often like a timeline where it kind of showcases like the different steps, especially if it's a larger project. You kind of set expectations of like, ideally, here's when we have it done by. And then usually what I do is share it async with the eng lead. And then we'll have a discussion in our weekly call where all the necessary questions will be asked. And then from there, we add it to the roadmap. Maybe usually the upcoming sprint, and then we get started from there. So that's kind of the process, and it works really smooth. And honestly, that's kind of where like product, you're probably doing something similar. If you've worked at all with like clients, you kind of are describing, well, here's what we need done. You'll write up a document. It's pretty similar to what I think most SEOs are doing. It's just in a little bit more formalized template.
Yeah, bringing a bit of structure. And I think in particular, meaning that everybody in that process knows what to expect, knows where they are in the journey, knows how that's going to be communicated. I'm really fascinated by the kind of iteration of that journey, I guess. And you mentioned this with the AI tools. There's often a little bit of a kind of a loop, I think, of discovery, right? You've got an idea, you mock something up, or you prototype it. You want to say, is this feasible? Can we do this? Should we do this? Does anybody like it? And even before you get to the SEO testing kind of stage of things, there's often that spike of like short, sharp discovery process. I think you've talked about that somewhere as well. So what does that look like? How do you collaborate on that stage?
Oh yeah. So I always start kind of like from a very data driven lens. So don't try not to go off vibes when I can. So what I'll always start with is looking at the top converting pages or, subfolders. And that's always where I start my work, is confirming, okay, are these pages actually driving impact? Because, a 10% improvement on a page that drives the majority of your impact is going to be a lot more impactful than something that drives kind of a smaller amount of conversions or traffic or whatever you're trying to drive. So I'll usually start there. And then from that point, the discovery process of what I'm trying to improve can look like looking at competitor pages that are similar. I'll use tools like Ahrefs to kind of see, hey, where are our gaps in topics? And are competitors winning with them? If so, why? How are they doing that? I usually look at the SERPs. I'm a big fan of manually looking. I know you can use tools like Ahrefs and all these other things. I don't think there's anything that can compare to actually looking at the SERPs day in and day out to see the differences. You also want to see like, are AI overviews showing up? What are the SERP features? Kind of what do I need to know from a competitive standpoint, and search features to have all the info I need to create this PRD. And so that's kind of a little bit of how I do research. Occasionally I'll ask my team to like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What are your thoughts? Sometimes I'll look at LinkedIn or do some research on like Perplexity of like, hey, here's what I'm thinking of doing. Can you provide me any insights into if this worked for others? Another helpful thing too is I'll look back at my old tests if this is something similar to what I've done before to provide extra validation. So I'll pull in old test results and say, hey, when we changed the template to be like this, we saw X lift. Here's kind of something similar I want to do here. So if we need extra validation for prioritizing the project, then I'll kind of lean on third-party results and first-party results.
You'll pull that into the PRD itself.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, nice. Cool. Yeah, I'm also a big fan of actually looking at search results. And it's funny, actually, it seems like we're talking a lot about the agency days, but I remember it was one of my favorite in-person interview questions, only really works in person, was to come up with a keyword or a query and get the interviewee to guess what the search result would look like. And just describe, what kinds of websites would you expect to rank for this? What would you be expecting to see? What kind of search features would you expect to see? And so on and so forth. These days, it doesn't work for a virtual remote interview because obviously people just pull up the actual query. But it was quite enlightening the
Oh, yes.
the range of discussion. Like obviously it rules. There's some terrible answers, but so there's really interesting conversations when people have ideas of what it might look like that are actually different to what it does look like, but in very defensible, very plausible, very reasonable ways. And it's kind of like anytime you're doing user research. Actually, I don't know if you on the product manager side, we'll have to dig out the video. But have you seen the product manager's nightmare thing of it's just it shows the product manager, and it says something like watching real users use your product, and it's got one of those baby shape sorter things, and with the different shape holes, right? So it's got like a square, a circle, a triangle, all these holes, and the first one is they put the square in the square hole, and the product manager's like yes, and then they take the circle and they put it in the square hole, and the product manager's like, what are you doing? And then they take the triangle and they put it in the square hole, and it's just like when you actually see real users use stuff, it's
Oh my gosh. And there's a tool called Full Story I used at my last job, and it's like exactly this. And you could like
You're like, what are you
watch
doing?
user sessions. And so I really can relate to the block where I'm like, what are you doing? But anytime you see that, that's inspiration for you to kind of improve the user experience. So I tried to view it that way. But there were times when I'm like, man, like, how do we make this even more obvious? So
Yeah.
and can
The
relate
problem
to
is
that
users.
for sure.
Yeah.
But
It ties actually into the segue I was going to ask about was into that audience research piece, and as you get from the researching the individual user to more like researching groups and audiences and so forth, you put some really interesting articles out about zero volume keywords and how some of this research that you've done kind of feeds into test ideas. So I'm really interested in where test ideas come from. And,
yeah, for sure.
you mentioned some competitor research, but how do you go? Where do you go? How do you go? What do you go looking for when you're doing that research, feeding into your kind of ideation process?
Yeah, and there's so many different types of research. So I would say like one right away is just kind of doing my own. So I'll do audits, just where I'll take a few hours and look through a section of the site that I want to improve, and just jot down anything from an SEO or user experience, standpoint that I'm like, this could be improved. So from the SEO side of things, I still have like an audit checklist, and I think having checklists in front of you, because there's hundreds of factors, I think that's really helpful. And then I'll kind of just go down the list and check all of those things. A lot of times you'll catch something that you missed that is like really basic or obvious, like some pagination issue or missing schema. And so you can kind of jot those things down, and that's where you start to get your stack rank of like, here's what I think will make the most impact to least. And you start kind of getting your list. From a UX standpoint, I think that's really interesting too. So there's been times where I'll look at like our key product page that drives, let's say, like 70% of all of our SEO traffic and conversions. And what I'll do then is jot down every single point of friction that I see. And so one example that could be interesting is I noted on a product page that our CTA was really focused on like sign up for our trial. But I kind of was just thinking, no one wants another subscription. Right? Like, we're all sick of free trials. What do they actually want? And in this case, it was to basically read this book free for 30 days. And I was like, that's such a compelling value prop. Why aren't we putting that in the button? And so that first idea, that was actually kind of rose to the top for priority, because I was like, this is a very low effort change. I could get this done in a day with my engineers. And I have this theory that it'll really improve things. And we increased conversions with that one change by 13%. It was like in the mid six figures of revenue. It was a really impactful change. And that's kind of, that was what my first experiment, like an actual A/B test CRO experiment. And from there, I kind of just became hooked, because websites just have so much low hanging fruit. And I found that there's not a ton of testing with like those individual elements. And those things can also produce not just conversion impact, but like actually drive more SEO traffic as you get more engagement on the page, which I think we all have surmised for years. Google does look for people to actually engage and not bounce on the page. So yeah, that's where I start, is with kind of self-auditing. Another thing, I've been fortunate to have user research teams. And so you can use tools for this. I want to say there's a tool like Winter, where I think you can use that to get user research and get people's real-time feedback. We're working with an agency that is leveraging Winter right now for us. And then we've also just interviewed actual people and asked them to take actions across our site and share any points of friction or confusion. And that has been incredibly helpful. I would say that's actually like fully shaped my roadmap for this year, is reading real people and what they find confusing. And in our case, there was a lot of opportunity, let's just
Found
say.
some things. Yeah, that's great. And I'm really fascinated by the user experience, the user research stuff. I've done a lot of the scaled stuff, a lot of the online panels and those kind of things. I've never sat in person one or done the interviews of the one-to-one user research.
Yeah.
And it's something that I'm fascinated by. Did you have them start on your website, or did you give them kind of open-ended tasks that they could complete across any? Because I'm also interested in this from an SEO standpoint of saying, start at Google. Your task or the job you're trying to fulfill is X, and actually see what they search for as well as where they click, as well as what they do, and then extending that into the AI world, right? Okay, now you can start on ChatGPT or you can start on Gemini. I think it's going to get really interesting.
Wow, that's so interesting. We actually haven't done like that level of like starting from the search. I would be so fascinated to see kind of like the search journey. Where we typically start from is when they're actually on the website, but we do stipulate, okay, you're a new user, you have not signed up for this product before. Right. Tell us kind of what information you would need and how you would get there in order to get what you need to sign up, have the confidence. And so in this case, the user research team were the ones to kind of determine the actual experience of that research questionnaire. But we created kind of a PRD beforehand that said, here's what we want to learn. These are all kind of like the goals and the outputs of this. And then they created some of the inputs, and that we worked together on that. And so that was really helpful.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. The whole thing with user experience, you mentioned you're getting the double whammy, maybe even the triple whammy of actually improved conversion rate, improved user satisfaction. There's then Google measuring, as you say, directly measuring bounce rates or whatever metric they use for that. And I think there's also the proxies for those things. So Google trying to estimate your user friendliness or your UX based off that their own rendering of the page or whatever. Across all of that, you've talked a bit about blending those things, especially as it gets harder and harder to get top of funnel traffic, right? So as with AI overviews and AI mode and all of these other kinds of things. I guess we're just going to be running more tests that are hybrids, right? Where we're looking for any of those impacts.
Yep, exactly. And so I run two types of tests. One is your SEO test, which is with SEO, you make the change. There's no showing, half of users one thing and half of users another, because ultimately search engines just receive one version of the page. And so there's the SEO tests, which typically you can run as pre-post, so you just make a change and observe the impact. Or I have split tests running right now where I take 50% of the URLs in a subfolder, make, say, a title change or a content change, and compare that result to the 50% that did not receive it. That is the truer way to run a test, because then you're kind of guarding against things like algorithm updates or other changes that could skew, seasonality, anything that could skew your results. You're getting truer like split test results. And then the other side of it is I run true A/B tests, which are user experience tests where you're actually serving a completely different version of the page to half the users. So let's say on your homepage, you wanted to test something like a different hero image. I'll land on the homepage and maybe see the control, the original, and you'll go on and see the new version that I designed. And then I use a tool called StatSig, and you can see in real time how those changes impact your metrics. And so I think it's important to kind of do both. SEO tests can help, improve traffic, but I actually do find that it is so much harder now to drive traffic than it was even like 5 years ago. You've probably seen those CTR charts, just even from last year. It's wild. Like position 1 is basically now like position 8 in terms of CTR. And it's just, that's where looking at the SERPs, Will, is so helpful. Like we were talking about, is even just showing like leadership of like, hey, you're wondering why we're losing traffic? Look, our rankings haven't changed. But look at where, pixel wise, we might as well have lost 8 positions, and there's nothing period, there's nothing we can do about that. But what you can control is the efficiency of your traffic. So when people do land on like your homepage, your pricing page, whatever it is, you can try and improve the conversion rate of that experience. So that's why I've really just started doubling down on the actual UX A/B testing, because when all else fails, when traffic is being siphoned away from you, when Google's doing things like removing the sponsored or ad tags and more people are driving to paid, what you can still do is rely on your own kind of instincts of improving UX and be able to kind of still show growth that way. So that's kind of where I think SEO is the future, or I mean, really now. I think it's all about testing and UX, because it's a way of still driving growth from organic traffic when you're just watching that consistently go down into the left.
Yeah, I mean, it also ties into so you don't have to tell me on testing either kind. We do the kind of UX and conversion rate testing at Search Pilot as well as the SEO testing. And there's something really interesting about the interplay, I think, of the fact that so often I've heard product and UX teams and conversion rate teams concerned about the impact of an SEO change on conversion rate. But it's really very recent that we've ever heard the other way around, of them being concerned about the impact of their changes on SEO performance. And obviously, like a homepage hero banner, maybe limited effect. But when you're talking about things, we work a lot in e-commerce, and seeing teams discussing, we think we might get a better conversion rate if we take all the text off this page, on a product listing page or a category page or something like that. You're like, I mean, you might. The smaller number of people who find that page might convert better, but a smaller number of people are probably going to find that page. And so we often run them sequentially. We often run both tests on the same hypothesis or the same change. So it sounds like we're pretty aligned on that.
Oh, yeah. And that's so smart. And that's actually one of the biggest challenges, I think, being in-house and being in a product role is the website is your product and you need to defend it. And so that's where I think building strong relationships with pretty much all the teams that impact the logged out surfaces, that is like my number one goal. So as soon as I started at Upwork, that was one of the first things I did is kind of identify the other PMs in those teams, everything from the search and recs team to the folks that work on the homepage, the folks that work on the registration flow. Kind of anytime you touch that logged out surface, I wanted to get involved and kind of share, hey, these are the things I care about, and here are the changes that really impact SEO. So for instance, any text changes, any technical changes, any changes to indexation, these are all things that could be either beneficial or catastrophic to driving that free traffic. And so that I think is one of the most helpful things, is just getting yourself involved in the process and just saying like, hey, I don't ever want to be a roadblock. Just feel free to loop me in and we'll actually make the project more successful together, so that we don't end up like...
It really is in everybody's interest if you can collaborate on that stuff, because there's nothing that's going to wreck your week quicker than a botched rollout that will damage that.
And they don't want to be the team that caused that either.
Right.
I've been fortunate both in-house places I've worked, like everyone up to C-suite knows SEO and verbalizes that because it is a larger part of the business, and that is both a very large blessing and also can be a bit of a double-edged sword, because
definitely under the microscope.
Yeah, exactly. Like people really care, are invested in your work, but at the same time, there's also a bit of a microscope on you. So when traffic is down, even if it's industry wide, you have to kind of come prepared to say, you can't just be like, oh, it's just the algorithm, it's just Google, this is just the way things are. That doesn't fly. You have to come up with a plan of like, hey, even though this is happening, here's how we're going to continue growth. And so that's kind of where I do think SEO in a way can and should shift to almost more of like a growth marketer mindset, where we're not just doing things for search engines, we're also, we're prioritizing the user experience.
Yeah, for sure. We're on the same page about that. I think while we're talking about user experience, you've also talked a little bit about talking in user-centric language, and this is something that we've seen really big results from. Not changing the actual result, right? It's still an X% uplift, but just describing what we did in more user-centric language. So, rather than some technical description of schema, saying this was making the page more machine readable or that kind of thing. We had one where we talked about, instead of it being a title tag update, it was about using incorporating the brand benefits into natural language on the page or something like that, and it then traveled so much further and so much better within the organization. It resonated with the C-suite who were like, yes, this is aligned with our strategy. This is not some, geek in a basement, tweaking HTML tags. You got any other tips, any things that have worked particularly well for you or horror stories in that area?
Absolutely. I have a mantra that I repeat to myself pretty much every time I create a doc, and it's called "No one cares about crawling." uh, and that can just stand for kind of anything. So actually, every document I read through as if, like, am I writing this as an SEO to another SEO, or am I writing this to my boss's boss? And so I've actually even trained ChatGPT to like review my documents that way of like, here is a document that worked well for my boss's boss, and this is how I want to frame things. Everything is framed in terms of business impact and revenue. Everything.
Yep.
And if you think like crawling does impact business revenue, but you have to be kind of a storyteller. So instead of saying this will improve crawling of X subfolder by whatever percent, no one cares. They don't know what that means. You can frame it though as like, this change will help search engines find these page types, and the more traffic we get, we expect X amount of revenue. That's going to capture attention much more because you're tying SEO work to actual business impact. And like, I would say that has to be done for every single thing, even if it's like the most technical concept you could imagine, sitemap, schema. That all still applies to your
Just keep
users.
asking why.
Just keep asking why. And yeah, I think it's a skill that takes a little while to hone, but like over time, I think after years now being in product, I start to like, I kind of lead with that business impact. So it's becoming a bit more natural, but it is always like a fun challenge. Like, how do you turn sitemaps into money? But as someone who loves writing, I take it as kind of like a fun storytelling challenge. So that's another thing in-house is like those soft skills of building relationships, storytelling. They become in some ways like more tantamount than actually knowing SEO skills, which both important, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had a better name for them because soft skills and hard skills doesn't do it justice.
I cannot stand that, but I haven't figured out another term. Let me know if you find one.
Yeah, and I struggle with this actually because I think because I am interested in crawling.
Yeah.
And so, I am just a massive geek, and I want to write the doc that's like, here's what happens at the robots.txt level, and all that stuff, and the server response codes and so forth. And so I have to work quite hard, and I think I need your ChatGPT thing because I often think I'm done, and then I read it again, and I'm like, no, mate, this is still full of jargon. Nobody knows what you're talking about. Nobody cares about that thing, and yeah, just get it closer to the business.
Yep. We'll just put a sticky note on your computer. No one cares about crawling. That's what I do, and it is a tough pill to swallow because I also love to geek out on that stuff. But
right.
One little tip is just when I first started, I did actually ask my boss, like, hey, what's a kind of SEO focused document that has worked really well for leadership? And he did have one. And so I uploaded that to ChatGPT and I said, this is a document that worked really well for senior leadership. Please like take this kind of language and this framing of technical SEO concepts. And whenever I'm writing a PRD, I want you to like view it in that lens. So often I'll ask like, hey, how does this work for my boss's boss? And I get really good feedback from that where it'll kind of call me out and be like, hey, I know that you think this like little thing is cool, but you don't even actually need to explain what this is. They don't care what schema is. All they care about is how it translates to business impact. So like make that the star. So it's just really helpful. And it was just a quick thing. And
I love that. But it's also a super concrete, specific tip. I think for the audience is like you say, go to your boss and ask for a document that's gone down well with the boss's boss and use that in those ways. I would definitely add to it that these things, ChatGPT and the like, can be too kind, too nice, too sycophantic. Tell them you want the harsh feedback, and like don't let them off the hook for letting you off the hook, as it were.
Oh yeah, I'm always yelling at them like, be honest. And then it'll be like, okay, transparently. I'm like, why didn't you tell me the first time?
Yeah, too much of a people pleaser. Okay, we're close to wrapping up, but to round things out, I know that you described a number of tests that you've been doing. You get to publish some of these things. I've seen some of it on your social media. So firstly, where should people follow you for the best future tips and tricks? And do you have any tests that you want to particularly highlight that have been interesting, exciting, surprising?
Yeah, yes and yes. So best place to follow me would be LinkedIn. I would love to connect with y'all. Just drop me a line that kind of listen to the webinar, and I would love to chat about tests with you. So yeah, LinkedIn is where I share pretty much all of my test findings and just kind of SEO learnings and all that good stuff. And then secondly, there have been a few SEO specific tests that I've run recently that I think have been interesting. So I did post about this, and it was interesting, like the publish date test. I don't know if you ended up seeing that one, but it was one of the first things that I ran at Upwork. Is basically I found that having both date modified and date published was not helpful, because despite us updating our blogs literally like every couple months, our team is so on top of that. Google was pulling the date published. So it looked like our posts were from 2021, when in reality they were from like fall of 2025. And so we removed date published and just kept date modified. So it was the most updated date. Basically within 2 or 3 days, Google had made that change and CTR increased 20%. We literally, it exploded, and you could see an extremely clear line. And I use an SEO tracking tool that can kind of show pre-post if something was a stat sig positive change, and it showed very quickly, this was positive based on the improvement that you made, even despite any seasonality changes. So that was an example of, again, something technical where I didn't talk about like the date modified schema and all this stuff. I just said we improved content freshness, visibility, and we saw X amount of traffic as a result. So that was a really fun one. As a tip, if you have both dates, get rid of them. Google cannot seem to figure it out. Another one is, like, I think we're all probably familiar with title tag changes, but something that I did was run it as an actual split test. That was one of my first times doing that, was this year, having the actual tooling to be able to do that. And tools, I think, like Search Pilot, right, can allow you to do that. Yep. So anyone can do that. And so split up the URLs. And not only did we increase traffic close to 10% by making them more value prop focused, basically I went on Search Console and saw the top keywords, and we were not including 2 of these top keywords anywhere in the title tag. And they were also very value prop oriented. So by including those in the titles, we increased rankings, traffic, click-through rate, all the good things. Traffic went up almost 10%. And we actually saw conversion rate increase of 18%. So not only did we increase traffic, but because the people clicking were higher intent because of those terms, they also converted at a higher rate. So that's just one example too of how like these SEO changes can both increase traffic, but like also higher intent users, because that's ultimately who you want. You don't want traffic for traffic's sake. You also want to get better traffic.
Yeah, sounds like money. So that's the big thing that we've been banging on about for years, really, is folks working on large websites, especially where you can do this stuff at scale, where you can get to statistical significance. You really want to be able to tell those stories like you just did. And I think too many folks are still stuck in that way of kind of saying, we did some things and, sure, this has happened and that's happened, but, we think we're doing good work, and it doesn't cut it. And I think what we're trying to do with our mission is really bring that kind of rigor and that kind of storytelling ability to more folks. So yeah, love it. I'm certainly following along for more test results. So recommendation to the audience is definitely connect with Abby on LinkedIn, and I've seen some of those write-ups, and it's fun and interesting, and we look forward to hearing more for sure.
Well, thank you. And I did want to end with one last one we're testing right now is got to include the AI LLM situation over here, where we added an FAQ to one of our key pages, and we learned that other sites were actually outranking us for some of our top brand queries. So I think just a really easy potential win is just look at all the questions that people are asking about your brand. Are you ranking number 1 for all of them? Do you like your answers? And if not, that is a really good way, I think, of testing, like, hey, does adding this FAQ or adjusting it to be more clear, will that improve your AIO visibility?
For sure. And
so, TBD,
we've just started actually running some, it's the same. So we've got some experiments running now that are using AI traffic, so traffic from ChatGPT and the like, as the success metric. And so, we at SearchPilot have our regular case study test result email that hopefully everybody is already on, but we're coming soon to that email list is going to be some AI or GEO, whatever you want to call it, test results as well. So
that's so interesting, and that's where I think, it's not traditional traffic. It's literally we're just going to be looking at the SERP and saying, hey, do we show up now? So this is the first of its kind test where it's actually kind of a little bit more. It's still data oriented, but it's a little bit more about like actually manually checking. So
it's
gonna be interesting. Curious
to
see
exciting. So, listen, it's been great. Thank you so much for sharing the story and the journey and all the interesting, exciting work that you're doing. Hope everybody connects with you on LinkedIn, and thank you for your time. And to everybody listening at home, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks so much, Will. Thanks, y'all.